like to, Richard. Richard Hoagland is a former museum space science curator, a former NASA consultant, and during the historic Apollo missions to the moon was science advisor to Walter Cronkite and CBS News. And he's founder and principal investigator of the Enterprise mission, and he's currently investigating implications of ancient ET ruins in the solar system. He's on this panel to address space, films about space and the universe, and he just spoke here last night. I think you went to 1:30?
I think so.
And he's also doing, his film is a 12-minute film going to be shown at 3 o'clock across the hall there. It's called Cocopelli and the End of Time. And then Richard is also doing a presentation, a post-conference event tomorrow from 7 to 10 p.m. on the private space response to 2012. Richard's a very extremely popular speaker here at the expo. So I wondered, Richard, I want to give you some very broad questions. If you could just first of all talk about the films that have the feature. Oh, I'd like to stick with feature films first, and then you can move to documentaries if you want. But people are more familiar with the feature films. So if you could just talk about how what's being said in the popular feature films that are coming out now. Is anything of importance being said, or you know?
Well, I agree that Apocalypto is a film that I'd really want to see because I know some of the background and I'm entranced with what Gibson is up to. He's up to something. He's dealing in the most interesting, non-trivial subjects, which is who are we? What are we doing here? What is our antecedents? Where are we going? I mean, that to me is what film. I was really disappointed in Da Vinci Code because it didn't really grapple with this. It was superficial. I expected a lot more of Ron Howard because he is a Mason. He became a Mason in 3 days. He had to become a Mason to make Apollo 13. 13 was a very...
Why was that?
Because there's a whole Masonic tradition to NASA that I'm going to talk about Monday night.
Okay.
You know, secret societies in the space program is a huge unknown that we're dealing with, not only in my presentation, but also ultimately television, film, and that kind of thing. So I expected much more of Da Vinci than I saw. And you notice that it was a blip, and then it died. Did you happen to see any of the Cannes Film Festival, where there was a huge rollout of Da Vinci? They built a huge black pyramid on the beach at Cannes. I have the pictures with Da Vinci Code written on it. It was a huge black representation of the Great Pyramid. And it was like, what's going on here? But it was never referenced in any other literature, in any other discussion, posters, whatever. It just was just sitting there like the monolith, except instead of a big door, it was a big black pyramid. In terms of feature films that really have moved me, I would have to go back a couple of generations. I mean, when you sent me
Well, I'm talking about films that deal with space and the universe and extraterrestrials.
Well, 2001 is the obvious film, you know, and you know, I could not do an analysis that would hold a candle to the analysis that Jay did years ago. So I just refer you to Jay's website and read 2001, and that's it. That's really what Kubrick and Arthur was all about. I mean, he has captured the quintessence. The longest, most interesting film cut in history, is in 2001. That jump between, you know, Homo erectus and millions of years into the future with the spaceship, you know, which the two representations of weapons, the bone and the space, the nuclear weapon in orbiting Earth. So in terms of space movies, you see, I hate to categorize stuff into these genres because life is much more interesting and much more complex. And the Hollywood crowd tend to categorize. They tend to put things into certain little bins and boxes, and they don't realize that we're multi-dimensional people that can have as much interest in space film as a reflection of spirituality as we have in an action-adventure film. I mean, one of my favorite modern films is the last one that Schwarzenegger made, which was Last Action Hero. Last Action Hero is an astonishing film. It is saying so much at so many different levels, from the cat's eyes to through the screen, the idea of what is reality, what dimension are we really living in, what role does imagination play in a matrix kind of lifestyle reality. But there are so few films that really challenge you to think at that multiple symbolic level, because I think there's an agenda to keep us dumbed down. I think Hollywood is definitely designed to keep us dumbed down, and the most astonishing thing that's happened, which I agree with you, and of course Jay and I have had umpteen conversations, is that the technology now has permitted us to break out of the box so we can throw away all these little union thingies and simply do it ourselves. And that's why I'm sitting up here like a stranger in a strange land. I'm not a filmmaker. I don't want to be I don't want to be known as a filmmaker. I'm a person with some ideas that I want to put on film, which to me is a very different starting point. Because Cecil B. DeMille said, if you want to send a message, send a telegram. Don't make a movie, right? Okay? We are literally all personifications up here of people who have turned that idea upside down, who have really interesting ideas. We think they're interesting, of course. And we've made films or television stuff to present our ideas. And we're nakedly unabashed that we have message films. We now have audiences for message films. There's living proof up here that message, because people are desperate. They're so thirsty. They're like that New Yorker commercial of the alien crawling across the desert, crying gently, ammonia, ammonia. People want more ammonia. They want what we have to offer. Thank God. And now the technology is so transparent that we can actually reach the people that we need to reach.
How is Hollywood controlling? I mean, how is Hollywood controlled?
Money. How was the world controlled? Remember the golden rule? He who has the gold makes the rules. I'm totally in agreement that the big monster film. I mean, when George Lucas basically broke ground and said small films are it, and he has made megabucks, gigabucks with big films, the paradigm shift is right here. Our time has come.
Thank you. So what subject matters relating to, and storylines relating to space, extraterrestrials, would you like to see explored now in films?
See, I hate that ghettoization. I'm not a space person. I'm a life person who happens to live in outer space. remember that line from Star Trek IV? Where he's having dinner with what's her name, and I forget what the line was. She said, are you involved in space? He says, no. He says, I'm involved in life. I just happen to live in outer space.
But don't you want films made about the materials that you're working on?
But the fact that I found E.T. ruins and they happen to be in space is almost accidental. It's not where you hang your hat. It's where you live in your heart. The model that I'm working on, the research, which has led me in the direction of making films to tell people about it, is that we're not the only folks around. And we have very, very extraordinary history, which has been denied, suppressed, absolutely censored, kept from us by deliberate, conscious political design, because it's all about control, control, control. And we should not be allowed to realize who we really are, because if we got back in touch with who we really are and were and what we can become, the controllers lose the game. And they don't want to lose their game. So they have kept suppressed what we really are, which encompasses not just life on this planet, us now, but what we used to be on the moon, on Mars, in the outer solar system, all these incredible images of ruins that we have found, because the game is so interesting. It's not, as I keep telling some of my more mainstream government people, it's not CIA versus KGB, where you're trying to keep secrets. This is a metaphysical game. And it's if the student is ready, the teacher will show up. There is so much out there. All you have to do is open your eyes to see what the truth is. but you have to be willing to look and see what the truth is. It's that old joke I used last night, and it always gets a laugh. You know, how many psychiatrists in Marin does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, but the light bulb really has to want to change. People have to want to know. And most people, Rob and I have this discussion all the time because her field is health. You would think people would be really keen on something that would keep them alive longer and keep them happy and healthy. Are you nuts? They want to give away their power to the first doctor they find so they don't have to take responsibility for them someday dying, probably a lot sooner than they should have. And our two fields, although in the surface so disparate, are really very connected because I'm also dealing in a realm where a lot of people do not want to know. So I've decided that I don't care about those folks. I'm going to make film or television with my message about the people that really care. And what's happening as we approach this 2012 nodal point is the physics is changing. And I'm watching more and more people in the mainstream kind of waking up and looking around. Oh my God, they're lying to us? George Bush is lying to me? I mean, look at what happened in this last election. People showed up and there's change afoot. There's stunning change afoot in the mainstream. I'm watching Tucker Carlson take on John Sensenbrenner about, you know, driver's licenses and patriot mandates and all that stuff. I'm watching Chris Matthews absolutely standing toe-to-toe now with the administration on Iran, providing visual split screen of Bush talking about Iraq prior to Iraq and Iran prior to Iran, and they're exactly the same message. They're exactly the same, almost word for word, image for image, and talking point for talking point. But there's people in the mainstream actually now talking about this, not us crazies out on the bar or whatever. The world is changing in front of our eyes, and it's like, you know, that old saying, surf's up. We're here at the right time, at the right place to get messages out, to get audiences who want to see it, and damn the unions, because we don't need them. We have messages that people need and want to hear. And that's why I wanted to be on this panel, because frankly, I'm not a filmmaker. I'm a guy with a message. I found something unique. I found E.T. ruins that frankly are ruins. And that hasn't been done a very long time in film except in fiction. Well, what if you introduce the idea that it's not fiction, which is what I'm trying to do and having a modicum of success.
So Richard, if you were given $100 million by like a plastic surgeon, financier, and what would be the ultimate film you would make? Would it, well, maybe can you tell me how you would depict maybe 2012? I know, it's ridiculous. It's hard to come up with a storyline, but what elements would you want in the story? Or
well, if I was given
you've got some characters that you want.
If I was given $100 million, I'd go to Mars. Then I'd have the ultimate film. You know, I could take a brownie or, you know, this little thing, and you know. No, it's this idea that bigger is better. There are lots of times when bigger is not better. If I had, I have 3 projects now. Well, maybe 3, 4, 5. I forget how many. 2 are fiction, dramatizations. We had a development deal with RKO, which I thought I died and gone to heaven, because RKO was, to me, the epitome of filmmaking, the classical filmmaking. Citizen Kane came out of RKO. I went and researched, you know, I talked on our show about this incredible marriage between Sarnoff and John Kennedy's dad. And I thought, we had it. We had the right guy, the right executives. You know, they gave us free rein on writing script. It died. Development hell is not a metaphor. It died. But it gave us a cachet. So we now have other film people looking at one of the fictional scripts. They attended my 4-hour presentation last night and stayed to the bitter end, which was very impressive. The head of the production company and his chief assistant, who have read the script, I wanted them to see the reality against which that script is based. There will be meetings while we're here in LA, you know. I've got another filmmaker we're doing some important stuff with vis-a-vis 2012 coming Monday Monday to see what I've got. So I've got people looking and asking the right questions. Then on the documentary side, you know, we've just done this trailer for Kokopelli, which is basically my take on the 2012 problem, the physics. Because in addition to doing film and media, I do research. And I do some pretty interesting research, if I must say so myself, because it hasn't been done in a very long time. We're rediscovering what the ancients used to know. Jay and I, of course, have had long conversations. I think we have nailed the physics behind 2012. And so if you look at this 12-minute trailer, which is just a tease, totally admit it's just a tease for what I want to do in the next year or so, you will see the essence of my message about 2012, which is the physics is changing. The galactic alignment is not symbolic, it's not metaphorical, it's real. I've got data, I can show you actual data. On the 22nd of December this year, I got another incredible spike. In my ultimate dreams, if I had a little smidgen of 100 million, I would go to Giza, I would, you know, put Zahi in a room, lock the door so I could get into the pyramid and measure the alignment at that critical time, which is right after the solstice next year. That's kind of like an immediate goal. I would film it. I would then send it out to everybody and say, look, it's real. It's a real physics. This idea that Sharron talked about, that time is accelerating, it's not an illusion. We are all so much younger than our parents, our grandparents. It's not an illusion. It's not the idea that when you get older, your time gets faster and faster. No, the physics is fundamentally changing. I can demonstrate that. It's an ancient, ancient, ancient science that I learned on Mars and on the moon. The ruins are speaking to us. The stones and the whatever is speaking. And I'm trying to put it all together now so that the modern people in this era, in this time, get it, that things are changing for a reason. And it's going to get a lot more interesting. Surf is up.
What preparation are you doing personally for 2012, and what do you suggest that other people do?
Learn as much as I can. I mean, there's a lot of people running around talking about negative horror stories. Oh, disaster and earthquakes and, you know, cats and dogs living together and all that. I love that line, Bill Murray. You know, writers don't get enough credit. You know, Jay and I used to talk about why did writers get divorced from directing their own films? What was that political ploy that you create this incredible thing, you put half your life into it, and then you hand it off to some turkey who's going to make his film? All right? You should have direct your next film, yes. I think we all have, you know, I'm so envious of Paula down there who's made 3 of them the way she wanted to, okay? And I need to talk to you about the Yuga cycles, because there's a huge component to the 2012 physics and all that in the Yuga cycles that go back to some very seminal celestial mechanics in India in the last century. Swami Yukswar, who wrote a book called The Holy Science.
Yeah.
He almost got it. And the question is, did he almost get it because he didn't know better, or it was politically spun? That's always my question. You know, how much is truth and how much is spun truth? Anyway, I'm wandering from your question.
What's my question?
What was the
What are
question?
your plans for 2012?
Oh, 2012, yeah. Well, to just keep figuring it out. And see, to me, if the physics really is driving this, and the physics we've now discovered is backed up by like 50 years of exquisite Russian laboratory data on something called torsion field physics, which is a 3D manifestation of the hyperdimensional stuff I've been talking about for years and years. A couple years ago, I was given this incredible stack of papers, and I actually found, maybe through one of our presentations, a Russian translator that will actually get me into the heart of some of this stuff. That came out of this conference already. Robin has a friend who reads Russian, and we've got to get her some of the papers. But there's a stunning database of real laboratory work that demonstrates this physics is real. It underlies everything we think of as reality. You can make machines that generate torsion waves, that generate anti-gravity and free energy and all this. It's a real science, and the KGB tried desperately to suppress it. As, of course, the CIA over here has tried desperately to suppress all of us looking at these unusual ideas. ultimately, it all comes down to consciousness. Because what the physics basically is telling me is that as we approach this nodal point, what we think and how we approach everything becomes much more relevant because it will manifest in the real world. It's the old, be careful what you wish for because you will get it. And, you know, people talk about it in various ways, you know, Jung and his synchronicities. Notice how many more synchronicities are occurring in your lives because it's all about resonance. This is about waves. It's all ultimately about frequencies and waves and standing waves and interference patterns and all that at the level of the physics of the matrix. The matrix was such an amazing idea that was so squandered with a stupid script. You know, we're not light bulbs. It's so much more interesting, okay? Although the light bulb changing does have certain relevance there. So what I'm doing to get ready for 2012 is try to work with George and Art and Coast and these extraordinary people of the Coast audience because I am incredibly fortunate. Apart from the film and the television, I've got the ear of millions of people, and we've done these consciousness experiments, and we're going to do more. And what we've now figured out is that they are dependent, Celeste, on timing. Because not every hour of every night of every year is the same. It turns out that there are alignments with the center of the galaxy where these consciousness experiments, if the physics is real, and it is, will work phenomenally better than at other times. We can make this a science of paradigm change, and it's the most extraordinary adventure that we all can participate in. It's very democratic, and it's only going to get more interesting as we approach 2012.
Okay, and your film, Kokopelli and the End of Time, which is playing at 3 o'clock, can you tell me a little bit about that and how you're going to try to, are you going to put that on the internet? How are you going to get that?
No, actually, I'm going to produce the full DVD set of the physics and the ancient, the Hopi and the Maya and the, you know, Indian approach. I'm trying to look at this in a very multicultural perspective because all these ancient guys were saying the same stuff. And they're talking about it in metaphorical language, but ultimately it's a physics. It's a physics of transformation. It's part of that whole yuga thing. We go through these cycles over and over and over again for the first time in 26,000 years. We come up to this alignment, and you don't think something would happen? I mean, I've been talking alignments for years and years and years. NASA, you don't know it, but they've been masonically launching and sending spacecraft to various places according to these celestial alignments from the beginning of the space program. So have the Russians. So have the Europeans. So have everybody. It's like, do you remember that show that George Gobel did with Johnny Carson where he had Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and I mean, and he sat there and he, you know, he's sitting on this couch. And he's George Gobel, and he's surrounded by these incredible stars. And, of course, the playoff between him and Carson was a master genius of eliciting the most unusual things. And he sat looking at everybody that was around him, and he says, do you ever get the impression that life is a tuxedo and you're a pair of brown shoes? In his cup, yes, yes. It's that out-of-place perception. Well, we're getting in sync. Being out of place is going to suddenly be very in.